Hi, everybody. I'm so excited today to have guest Susan Fiero-Baig. She is the mother of seven. Two babies were born in the hospital with certified midwives and 5 births at home. She has a multitude of interests and talents. She once served as a doula, helping laboring women. She's done a lot of photography. She's just been an advocate for mothering and the family and birthing and many other things. And she's also an author. And first, I want to welcome. Hi, Susan. It's so nice to see you.
Hi, it's so good to be here with you. You and I have had many conversations over the years, and this is our first time. This is the closest we've gotten to meeting.
Yes. Hi. So I am on the East Coast and she's on Central Time. Sorry about the few-minute delay. We had a little mix-up, but we're fine now.
And I was having a family conversation with our son, my son that's in Springfield. So we were doing a live, a FaceTime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great. So anyways, I want to welcome everybody here today. We have a great topic, advocating for the laboring mom. So Susan is going to be talking about childbirth choices, helping to facilitate the progression of labor, and especially advocating for the laboring mom, most likely in the hospital setting, because that's where we find that most people will be giving birth. And so I thought that this would be a good topic to talk about, and hopefully she'll share a couple of stories along the way. So go ahead and take over, Susan, and I will just be here to ask some clarifying questions maybe, and I will be monitoring anybody who wants to submit any comments or questions for Susan or anything about this discussion. Please feel free to do so, and I will read them and we can address those so we can make this participatory. So thank you, those of you who are live. Also, this is available to watch as a recording. So what do you have to say, Susan?
Well, first, since you mentioned a bunch of my interests, I wanted to mention about my book.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yes, her book.
I published this book. It's called A Mother's Worth, Celebrating Motherhood. It was intended to honor motherhood and also to inspire nurturing motherhood, nurturing mothering. All right. And so it's a great book to give year-round, but it's a wonderful Mother's Day book.
Okay.
And it's as a gift. And it has 3 places in the back where it can be personalized with photos of the mother and her children.
Nice.
So it's unique in that way. It's also a book that is has a lot of ethnic diversity. The moms are all very diverse. Most of them are Marine wives. And so that makes it very unique and special also. And it's available on Amazon.
Very good. And if you'd like to take off your glasses, I don't think you will be doing any reading. I'm seeing a little reflection. So thank you.
Go.
That's good. All right. So where do you want to start? Childbirth choices?
With my story.
Okay.
I had the 2 certified nurse midwife births in the hospital, and they were natural. There was no episiotomy. I didn't get an epidural, but I felt like there was something missing. There was something I didn't know because I was very frightened. I was in a lot of pain. I cried a lot. I was looking to others to take my pain away. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of help me get this baby out of me. With my first birth, particularly, I was very much kind of like a girl, I feel like, and I didn't know how to approach birth. I was very lost. So I kept studying. The studying I did with my first birth, my first pregnancy, I continued that on into my second one, thinking it would be much better. And in many ways it was. I had studied husband coach childbirth. I had a friend, Jenny Hatch, who was a Bradley instructor. She gave me information. She let me use her videos and read her books. And so I did have in some ways a better birth experience. I was more mobile, but he was posterior, so it was very painful. And she helped me to get through that. She was my doula. She introduced the concept of a doula to me. I didn't know what that was. A doula is a non-medical continuous labor support person.
Okay.
And so she actually had offered to be my doula. And my husband, not knowing what a doula was, had declined her service. He wanted it to be just he and I. He felt like she would take his place. Okay. And so when I went to give birth to our son, he actually ended up sick. He was nauseous. He was vomiting. And he said, "I'm sorry, honey, but you're going to have your mom take you. I can't go." Okay. And which really threw me for a loop. So he stayed at home with our daughter, and I went to the hospital, and I was there with my mom, and I felt very afraid and out of, disjointed, him not being there with me. That was completely not planned. And so I called Jenny, and she came down and she acted as my doula. And then my husband did feel better hours later, and he came to the hospital. She showed him how to do things like counter pressure and just, different things about how to support me. And she left because she had a 6-month-old son that she needed to get home to. Right. And my husband took over. But that interaction with them and her being there for me, he felt so grateful to her, and he was able to help me in a better way had she not been there and had she not been able to show him. So I was able to give birth without having a cesarean or without needing any intervention. So, so for many, it was a successful birth for me, but I was still in a lot of pain and had a lot of fear, and I just didn't feel like it needed to be that way. So I kept studying, and Jenny and I shared a lot of information. She shared just a lot more stuff with me and introduced me to home birth. Okay. And home birth materials.
All right. Let's go back just a little bit. You brought up frightened and fear twice. What is it that women are afraid of? What were you frightened of? Were you not knowledgeable about what it means, how the birth process unfolds? Were you afraid you were going to die? Were you afraid the baby's so big and it wasn't going to be possible to come out of you? What is this fear that women grasp onto and can't seem to let go?
I was afraid I was going to die. I was afraid of the pain. It's so intense, and I just didn't know how to cope with that. Okay. It's very powerful, and I had no idea how to cope with it. Okay. And so, so for the home birth, that was also the idea of home birth was terrifying. When she first mentioned home birth to me, I said, people do that? Yeah. Isn't that a pioneer thing? People still give birth at home, and don't they need malpractice insurance and a doctor and, all this stuff? And because it was foreign to me. Right. And so I studied it. I studied about home birth. I even studied, just natural childbirth across the board. I was just a voracious reader, and I read and I read and I read. And so I started, I guess you would say in my heart, I felt drawn to it, but then there was, the mind part and the fear part. So then a friend of ours gave birth at home, and I went over to take her dinner. And when I walked in, that was when I had this, for me, part of it was a spiritual experience. I believe, for me, I study something, I ponder it, I pray about it, and I had been praying to know what I should do. And when I walked in and I saw this family, I saw the mom in her bed and her kids in her house, and I just immediately knew that I was supposed to give birth at home.
Nice.
And I believe, and so I encourage women to study all of your options. Okay. You're not going to know what your choices are if you're not informed. I believe in informed choice. Okay. Informed choice does not mean doing what everybody else is doing or what other people are telling you to do. You are not going to be able to be led or guided or to know what is your path unless you study it out.
All right.
So your book was important to me because my third birth was a birth at home with a midwife. And then I found your book, which and other books that helped me go to an unassisted birth. Okay. So our fourth birth, fifth, sixth, and seventh were unassisted births. And, so I like to tell people, so many women will say, I couldn't do that. If I had birth at home, my baby would have died. I needed to go to the hospital. And I'm never going to tell somebody that, I can't tell you what is right for your birth.
Right.
That may have been the case for you.
Yeah.
We all have our own path and we all have our own truth. Okay. And for me in my life and for my children and my births, I know that I was supposed to give birth at home. Mm-hmm. There was no way around it for me. I had a very strong conviction about it. If a woman has a strong conviction that she's supposed to give birth in the hospital, of course I support that. Mm-hmm. Hospitals are there for reasons. There are women who should give birth in the hospital, mm-hmm. but if and study, and it's more than studying out choices is more than just deciding on whether you're going to go to the hospital or home. You have to study because you can take information from home birth and unassisted birth and apply it to a hospital birth.
Definitely.
You also need to be prepared because you may accidentally birth outside of the hospital, even if you're planning to birth in the hospital.
In the car on the way there, or you don't know. Yeah.
Or something may happen. There could be, a tornado or something. There could be, any number of things that could prevent you from getting to the hospital and make it so that you would have to give birth out of the hospital. And that would be very frightening if you didn't have some kind of information to help prepare yourself. Right. We have to be prepared. And I think this is what this whole COVID thing is teaching us, is that we need to have options and we need information. Just today, I read a news article about a woman who went to the hospital to give birth, was told that she would have to, she was perceiving that she was being told she would have to give birth without her husband being there. Mm-hmm. And he would have to wait in the car because of COVID. And so she went into what's called a triage room and had a panic attack, thinking of birthing without her husband, left, went home with him, and started to labor at home, and it came on suddenly. And the husband said, should I call the ambulance? And she said, no, I don't think we have time. And she gave birth in their bathtub at home.
Wow.
So, this story gives us a lot of information. For one, with COVID, things are changing daily. Some hospitals or in some states, they're saying a woman can't labor with her partner. In some states, they're saying she can. Sometimes they're saying, we get new information every day. Even throughout the day, things can change. So a woman who's planning to give birth in the hospital needs to know what the rules of her hospital are. The hospital, in the case that I just spoke of, they said that their rule is that the husband or the partner can be there for the laboring woman after she goes to the triage room, after they assess her and decide whether to admit her or not.
Okay.
So in the triage room, she has to be by herself. Once they decide they're going to admit her, then her partner can join her. Well, that woman didn't understand that. Either there was a breakdown in communication. Or for some reason, she thought they were talking about through the whole birth.
Okay.
So we need to communicate, and ask, what is the protocol? What's going to happen when I go there? Can I have my partner with me? Can I have a doula with me? Because in some places they are allowing a doula, in some places they're not allowing a doula.
Right.
So the other thing that comes out of that story is maybe laboring women shouldn't be triaged without their birth support person. Maybe that's something that is inherently,
lonely. It's lonely. You really want somebody there.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I wanted to have a labor and delivery nurse come onto this program, but she's working in a hospital and doesn't want to misrepresent anything. So she couldn't come on, but she did give some advice, and it's here in the Tampa Bay area. She goes, I can tell you to encourage your patients that they are going into the hospital to call beforehand if they have questions about staffing or safety and what supplies and visitors can come. She said, I know our hospital is down to one visitor and discouraging that visitor from leaving while the patient is in labor. So they need to bring in the supplies they might need, extra clothes, food, drinks, snacks, pillows. Also have someone who is going to take care of their animals or other children at home while they're staying in the hospital. So the point is, once that labor support person comes into this hospital setting, if you leave, you can't come back. You don't want to be bringing possibility of infection or germs back and forth. So this is a good thing. Like you said, call ahead that day. Things are changing every day. And there was something in the news somebody sent me in this area here. A woman was in the hospital, and at the time, I don't think they were allowing anybody in. And her husband and 4-year-old stood on the bridge, outside the hospital window, hoping the woman would look out for a wave. That's got to be heart-wrenching for people to be unallowed. And then you have to plan B and make changes, and it can be panic inducing and anxious. Yeah.
Yes. And it is, I want to talk about that, but there's like so much we could talk about, Lynn. The other part of that is some women are choosing to bypass the hospital and want to have home births. Mm-hmm. And that is problematic because there are not as many providers, there are not as many midwives set up to meet the demand because we haven't had a home birth demand. So there are midwives out there who have a certain number of clients that they need to be true to. Mm-hmm. And then there's this new influx of potential clients, and many of them are deciding later in their pregnancies, and that can be unsafe for a midwife to accept them. The midwife has to she doesn't just take any client that wants to have a home birth. They have to have a relationship. And so, you're not always able to just decide I'm going to have a home birth. And that may not be an option just because of, there being a lack of providers.
Yeah. True. All right.
So, but the other thing that I want to talk about with that example, I'm not done with that.
Okay. Good. Yeah, that's good.
Is, for me, part of having a home birth was that I needed to grow. I needed to learn some things to help me to cope. Okay. So I was able to have my third birth was at home. Okay. And my husband was like, who's going to catch the baby? And I was like, well, you can. And he was like, oh no, I can't do that. I can't, there's body fluids involved. And I'm like, really? But so we had the midwife there, but really I just had a completely different outlook with that third birth. I didn't feel like I needed anybody there. Mm-hmm. Yes, I wanted my husband there. Of course, I need him there. But I didn't need him there. I mean, there's a difference. With my first two births, I was so needy. And with that birth, I was more directing the show. And more in like he was able to go in and out. The nice thing for us with home birth was he was able to go outside and play with the kids on the swings while I labored in my room. And then he'd come and check on me, and we could have I could tell him what I needed early in labor. I didn't need him very much. And then later in labor, of course, there was a time where I needed him, to be with me specifically. And my mom was there and she was able to be with the children. But even though I did need him physically, he was very helpful with counter pressure and, just so important in my birth. But I still feel like I could have given birth on my own. I could have given birth without him. And so there was this mindset that I had to achieve. Then I had to realize that coping with labor, and this could be a whole segment on its own, is in order to cope with it, I had to release to it.
Okay. Good point. Good
I
point.
had to let it kind of move through me and release myself to it in order to overcome the powerful sensations. And, kind of like with crowning, when the baby crowns, you have all this pressure. And this is what was really scary for me at my first 2 births. When you feel all that pressure, your natural instinct is you want to pull back from it and tighten up and close up. And that's what we do. We get scared.
Right.
But I learned that we have to open and relax.
Yeah.
And, let it move through you. And then you're working with it. And then it's not as painful either.
Interesting. And it sounds like since you were at home with your loved ones only, your loved one, it was easier to open up and to relax a little bit. So
it is. And that was one of the reasons why I preferred home birth. But I still think that you can achieve that kind of mentality in the hospital. And that, yes, we don't want women to labor by themselves. But with the current situation right now, there is that possibility. And so by becoming informed and studying and learning, then you're going to be in a better situation to cope with labor, to be able to roll with new kind of circumstances with changes than if you hadn't, entertained any of the possibilities, any of the scenarios that are out of the norm.
Right. Let me read a comment. Nicole says, I would say that most people can't get their heads in the game to switch from a hospital birth to a home birth within just a few weeks, just out of fear of COVID. So you throw another fear in the mix, not the fear of giving birth, but the fear of this virus, you catching it, the baby catching it, baby being taken away. So there's a lot of fear that rises up, and it's hard within just a couple of weeks maybe to change your mindset from a full hospital birth to a home birth. So I think that agrees with what you were saying a little bit.
Yeah, and information is so important for overcoming fear. Information and also having faith and learning to have faith in our bodies and our ability to give birth. No matter where we're at, we can give birth. We're designed to do this, and we're going to have what we need.
You're right.
And even if that's even if it's in the hospital or at home, if you believe in a higher power, then you can believe for yourself that when it comes to it, you're going to have what you need.
Good.
So you're
point.
gotta have faith.
Yeah.
And even if things aren't quite like you planned, like what you'd planned,
right,
things will work out.
Yeah. So at some point, I would love for you to talk about coming full circle. You've given birth 7 times, and your oldest daughter got married and has a few kids, and you were present for her first birth. That would be a really neat story to share. So
I was a doula and a photographer. I did birth photography, and so I was a doula for home births, hospital births, for both. And there's, with what's going on right now, there's particular concern because some people may not be able to have a doula with them. And also some people maybe who are planning on having a doula can't afford to have a doula now because of financial restrictions, although I'm sure most doulas would work it out with them. But they're, whether it's a facility won't allow a doula or maybe finances won't allow a doula, if somebody was planning on having a doula, that might be taken away from them. And also at this point, some people may be watching this might decide that they would like a doula and maybe can't find one or something. So I'd like to talk about how to advocate for a laboring woman. And I did that for my daughter. I was acting as her doula, but I was her support, and I advocated for my own daughter. So she gave birth in a military hospital. Her husband was deployed, and she had a doula. Luckily, the military, somehow in the military, there's they will provide a doula for women whose husbands are deployed.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
So she had that doula, and she also had me.
Okay.
And so when my daughter had a midwife, a nurse midwife that she was going to, who was in a practice with a group of doctors.
Okay.
And this was her first birth, and she was going to deliver at the hospital there on the base.
All right.
And we met with the midwife and talked about the birth. And one of the things that came up was we asked about the possibility of using a telemetry monitor. So instead of monitoring her on the bed, where she would have to be tied down and strapped down and unable to move, we wanted her to be able to move freely. And a telemetry monitor will allow you to do that. It allows you to move about. You can even shower with it on. It's like strapped onto you. It's like Wi-Fi. It's like, wireless. And so a woman can be monitored and still be moving around, still get in a shower. And the midwife said, sure, we have those available, and you can use that during your labor. Mm-hmm. So we felt very good about that. We asked at the appointment prior to birth about, can she labor on the floor? Is she able to use a birth ball? There weren't birth balls at the hospital. We were told we could bring a birth ball. And yes, if she wanted to, she could labor on the floor. She could labor, she could move around freely.
Okay.
So those were two of the things that we had asked about that were important. And when it came down to the birth, my daughter labored at home as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And then she went in. And the first thing we asked was for the telemetry monitor.
Okay.
And the nurse said, I don't know what you're talking about. We don't have anything like that.
Oh, boy.
And I said, yes, you do. We spoke with the midwife. She assured us you have them here. Can you go ask? Could you go look? And she said, sure, I will go look, but I've never heard of that. So she went. She was gone for some time. She came back and said, yes, we do have those, but the battery's not charged right now, so she can't use it. So what that tells me is, one, they're not used frequently. Yeah. If the nurse at that hospital had no idea they even owned them, then she's never used one on any laboring woman. Okay. And so it's obviously not a common thing. So it also points out, as the second reason of why you need to have an advocate, because a telemetry monitor enables a woman to move around in birth. That is going to decrease her risk of complication.
And maybe even decrease labor time, because she's squatting, standing, and moving, and the baby's going to move into place probably quicker, and maybe even less pain. It
facilitates labor progression. Yeah. She's able to progress in her labor if she's able to move about freely. Mm-hmm. So if the nurse didn't come to us and say, oh, you're a low risk woman and you're healthy, you're low risk, we have a telemetry monitor that you should consider using.
Yeah.
She didn't come to us and say that.
Right.
We asked for it, and then she had no knowledge of it. Yeah. So sometimes the things that are best for you in labor, the medical team may not come to you and offer it to you as a choice.
Yeah, you'd never know. Most people don't know what they can ask for.
And that's why the battery wasn't charged. That's why she didn't know about it, because most people don't know about it and they don't ask for it. And, you know, we're all of us are creatures where we follow the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And so we're going to go along and do what we normally do, what is the usual, and we're not going to step out of that normally. Right. So if most women aren't wanting a telemetry monitor, then the nurses aren't going to offer it.
Okay.
So then we moved from the triage room into the labor room, and we had the birth ball. I asked the staff for linens, and I had taken plastic bags with me too, and I laid them on the floor, and I laid linens over that like a sheet and a blanket, and put the birth ball there, and my daughter was able to labor on her hands and knees. You know, you can add most, you know, nurses and staff, they're gonna take your request, and they're gonna, you know, kindly fulfill it.
Yes, they
will. But you have to know that you have the right to ask, and you know, you have the right to ask. It's your body, it's your baby, it's your birth. Yeah. And you are a consumer, and you have the right to say, this is what I need. Can you get this for me? Right. Most of the time they're going to say yes, if it's something that isn't going to put the baby in danger. Mm-hmm. And so her laboring on the ground isn't putting anybody in danger. They mm-hmm. had put the monitor on her, and the strip was fine. So she was able to labor on the ground. Well, the nurse came in, and he was going to put in an IV. And I saw him at the bedside getting ready to place an IV, and all of this stuff was on the other side of the bed, you know, other than the other side from her, yeah. And on a table over there. And I, you know, realized that I seemed pretty sure he was wanting her to get up from there to get onto the bed for the IV. Because
that's the way he's always done it, probably. Yeah, he was taking his position.
Yes, he was taking his position, doing it the way he normally does it, mm-hmm. Through no fault of his own. And so I said, you know, she's laboring on the floor. Is there any way that you could put the IV in while she's on the floor? And he stopped and he said, well, sure, I can do that. I've never done it before, but, you know, I could put my stuff over there in that corner, and I can go over there, and yeah, I can do that. And so I thanked him, and he moved, and he went over, and he got in the corner, and he got down, and he put his stuff over there. And then the next thing I could see he was going to start to advance to put the catheter in while she was having a contraction.
Oh my gosh.
So again, you know, I politely stopped him and said, you know, is there any way that you can hold off on putting that in until she's done with her contraction? And he stopped and said, oh, yeah, sure. You know, I can do that. So he waited till the end of the contraction, and then he put the IV in.
Okay.
So
you mean the catheter?
The IV catheter.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So that he could run fluids if needed.
Okay.
They'll put a catheter in your arm that's just in case fluids are needed. All right. And it's important because, you know, in a case of an emergency, but you know, at that moment it wasn't an emergency, and there was no reason to not wait until she was done with her contraction.
Yeah. Okay.
You know, I had been as a photographer at another birth where the woman was laboring, and the nurse, I wasn't hired as a doula, I was hired as a photographer. Okay. And the nurse went to go put the IV in, and the mother was concentrated and in her zone, and had to pull herself out of her zone and tell the nurse, can you not do that? Can you wait until I'm done? Yeah. And I wasn't her doula, so I wasn't going to say anything. You know, and so what that teaches us is so many things that, you know, I was there and I was able to advocate for my daughter. I was her mom, but also her doula. And people need to realize that a woman's birth team, the mother, the sister, the husband, whoever's there for her, has the right to speak up on her behalf to advocate for her.
Mm-hmm.
And part of our job as being a labor support person is to ensure that the environment is conducive to labor. So somebody might look at that and go, you know, to think when I was advocating for my daughter about the IV, oh, big deal putting an IV in a laboring woman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we need to break that down and look at what does it really do? What is the effect of it? Something so simple as putting an IV in, that breaks a woman's concentration. When you're in labor, you become very primal. Okay, it's a very instinctual and a very like sacred experience. I know, intuitive. It's very intuitive and very instinctual. Okay, yeah. And so we use a different part of our brain. We use a part of our nervous system called the rest and digest, that we use a part of our system that you don't communicate very well. Mm-hmm. You know, engagement with other people, having to look somebody in the eye, having to use the part of your brain that formulates thoughts, yeah, works against the part of your nervous system that needs to facilitate labor. Yeah. So you need to go to a place like mentally, physically, where you're turned inward and you're focusing on what your body's doing, and you got to shut all this off. Mm-hmm. So that you can focus and release to it and do all the things that your body needs, you know, all those hormones and everything that's happening. You have to go inward. Right. And if somebody's coming at you to put an IV in, and you have to stop and think, you know, there's so much. If you've ever taken a communication class, that's why we have miscommunication. There's so much that goes into forming a message, speaking the message. And so all that energy has just interrupted her whole process so that she can say, don't do that right now. Yeah. I remember being in the hospital with my first or second birth, and they brought paperwork to sign for insurance. And I'm like, wow, it was just very weird. It was an interruption. And it was like, wow, this is a business that's happening. This is not like a flowing birth, you know? So I was like, So and you know, some of those things we can't get around, but you know, so we want to do it in the most timely way and the most considerate way. And you know, really that's what the support team is supposed to be there for. Making sure the lights are dim, making sure people aren't talking loudly, making sure that the woman is able to, you know, do her thing, kind of looking ahead at what her needs are going to be and making sure those things happen so she doesn't have to ask for them. Mm-hmm. Another thing I was thinking about, what if you're at a teaching hospital and you have these medical students coming in, looking at you, observing? Could a doula stand up for that and say, can we just back off? I mean, you almost give away some rights when you go into certain environments that you really, sometimes I'm asking you, sometimes maybe you can't be assertive. Well, yeah, there's those times, and that's why location is so important. Mm-hmm. If you want a certain type of birth, then you need to go where your birth plan is going to be supported. Mm-hmm. And, you know, maybe that wouldn't be the right hospital for you. Right. So, you know, that's why I encourage a woman, when you're in labor, go visit a birth center, go talk to the midwives there. Go visit the hospital. You know, if the hospital that everybody goes to and that's where you're thinking you're going to go there and visit it. If somebody recommends, you know, a different hospital for other reasons, you know, you just don't just go where, oh, well, my insurance is going to pay for that. Right. You need to investigate your choices. So, and I'll give you a story. All right. My sister was going to give birth. And she was going to a hospital, and so I gave her my childbirth class, my tips. I gave her all my recommendations. I taught her about vocalizing and moving around in labor, being on hands and knees, the benefits of water, counter pressure, lots of different things. And so I was hoping to be there, but as a nurse, this is why I can't be a doula, is you don't know when a woman's going to go into labor, and I can't move my schedule around, you know, to be there for a birth. So I wasn't able to be at my sister's birth. Well, she went to the hospital and was laboring. She was on the bed on hands and knees, and the obstetrician walked in. This was a female obstetrician, not a midwife, an obstetrician.
Right.
And the obstetrician saw her and said, "Hey, would you like to use our birth stool? And you can get down off the bed and you could labor on the birth stool on the ground." My sister didn't know what a birth stool was. A birth stool is a traditional birthing tool that midwives have used throughout, you know, the generations for thousands of years, where it's like kind of like a horseshoe and it has legs and it, you know, sits off the ground. And so my sister got on the birth stool. The obstetrician got down on the floor with her cell phone, turned on the light, and was looking from down on the ground. And the baby was crowning. And when the baby was crowning, she said to my sister, "Reach down and grab your baby." And she grabbed her baby and she pulled her up and put her to her chest. And Lynn, I've never heard of a story like that before.
That's wonderful. What year was this and where? What year?
A couple of years ago. Just a couple of years ago in Missouri.
Missouri.
I mean, this isn't even California. You know,
Yeah.
you might hear a story like that in California or Colorado or, you know, Seattle, but this is Missouri.
Yeah.
And so this hospital is one that the birth centers locally, they go there when they have to transport, when they have to make a transfer, because this hospital is supportive of choice and you know, it provides options, and is you know, is open to the home birth community.
That's very nice. So what I want to say about that is when we come across good doctors and staff and hospitals, we as women are consumers, and we can mention this to other people, young women who want a hospital birth. "Oh, did you hear about this? This doctor, quote unquote, will allow you or encourage you to do this, and that will help you make a choice." The word of mouth, when you have good customer service, I guess, you know, word of mouth. And I want to mention a couple of comments here. Penny says that she heard that hospitals are planning to refuse any support for laboring moms, including husbands. So women need to be ready if the hospitals get overrun with cases or protocol changes, that you might not be able to have anybody go in with you. And it's not a time to be afraid. It's a time to be prepared. What are you going to do? How are you, you know? So anyway, so that's something that people should think about. You might not be able to bring anybody in with you. And Nicole, we were talking about IVs, and it sounds like you're supportive of an IV just in case. And so Nicole says, "Why are women allowing IVs anyways? If a woman feels confident and she doesn't want an IV and her labor's moving quickly, could she refuse?"
If you're going to a hospital to give birth, pretty much you're understanding that you're going to get an IV.
Okay.
I mean, you're not going to be, they're not going to let you be in the hospital without having that in place, because
it depends how far along in labor you are, because I had 4 hospital births, and I know I had 1 IV, my first child. I don't remember the others. Oh, well, Hillary, I arrived at the hospital and she was born within 10 minutes. So there was no time for anything.
Yeah.
And the others were kind of quick too. So I don't really remember.
Yeah, I mean, if you got there, I mean, it doesn't take long to put an IV in, but you know, of course, if things are going so fast, you may not get one, but pretty much they're going to want to have one in place.
Okay.
You know, so just, you know, it's not like, you have to decide what you're going to fight over. If that's something, you know, if you're not wanting to even get an IV, then maybe you shouldn't be going to the hospital. You should be pursuing, you know, looking at a birth center or looking at a home birth. You pretty much are going to, there's some things that, if you go to the hospital, they're going to want to monitor you. You can talk about ahead of time, if you're low risk, like how long, usually it's like 20 minutes. They're going to want to get a strip and to see if anything is, what the heart tones are like. Yeah. And if everything looks fine, then maybe they'll monitor once an hour for 20 minutes. Okay. Or, if they don't have a telemetry monitor. But pretty much if you feel strongly like you're not going to want to be monitored, you need to talk about that with your doctor ahead of time and find out what is your doctor or midwife comfortable with, what's the expectation, and if their expectation doesn't match your desire, then you would probably need to go look for some other provider that's going to work with you. Now, we don't all have, we're not all able to go to, the hospital that is most supportive of choice. We might have to go to other hospitals, and you can still get what you want. You just need to communicate ahead of time with your provider to know, to have them know what your wishes are, and for you to know what they have in place. And you can still get what you want. I have a young friend. She felt like her labor, her birth went very much the way she wanted it to, because she felt empowered. She had an obstetrician who she felt she could communicate with, and they made decisions together. Okay. All right. Good. She had an induced labor because she's very small and her babies are very large. Her labor was induced, and things went according to her plan, her dictates, Okay. So even though she was induced and it was in a hospital, like, that doesn't mean you can't still be satisfied. Like, as long as your desires are met and your wishes are met. And so we can't say, for somebody else and dictate to them what we think their birth should be like. Great. All right. Well, time is kind of getting beyond us. And so maybe we can wrap this up. Thank you, Susan. You've shared so much. And I like the stories that you shared. So hopefully this has been helpful for people. And so do you have any concluding remarks or any more comments? Hold your book up again for those of us who joined later. Susan wrote this beautiful book with great pictures of family and mothers, A Mother's Worth, by Susan Fiero-Baig. Those of you who came in a little bit late, there's a part that she can personalize a photo of you. No, you can personalize. If you buy the book, you can personalize it, put your own photos in the back of your family. Unless you're giving it as a gift, you could put photos of the person you're giving it to, their family, and give it to them that way as a gift. This can easily be done on Amazon.com. Just upload it. You can order the book on Amazon.com. Okay. All right. Very good. Yes. And because of COVID, Amazon is delivering, but their deliveries are a little delayed. So If you're wanting to order it for a Mother's Day gift, you want to do it well in advance. You're not going to be able to do it last minute, because I just ordered some copies and they're not going to arrive till the middle of April. Okay. So a couple of weeks out. All right. That's great. So I guess my final thoughts are, we all have our own path, and we need to study for ourselves and ponder and just determine what is our path. Where should we be giving birth at? Who should be there with us? And what is it that we want? And we need to think about these things ahead of time and plan for them, and then make contingency plans and have a backup plan. Because right now things are changing quickly, and you want to keep up to date with them, and you want to get yourself in a position where you have knowledge, because knowledge is power, and knowledge helps you to overcome fear. Very good. All right. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon. Lynn. Okay. All right. Bye. Thank you for joining us.